Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. Still talking about self-defense cartridges, handgun cartridges. The newest is the .30 Super Carry. Is this some kind of lightweight that can't pass muster, or is it a legitimate self-defense round? Stick around, we'll talk about it. As if we didn't have enough self-defense cartridges to argue about, Federal added a new one to our list in 2022. The .30 Super Carry. It was touted to give near 9mm terminal performance with a bit less recoil and increased magazine capacity. So far, the variety of pistols chambered for the .30 Super Carry is not extensive, though most ammunition manufacturers have added it to their list, both with a self-defense round and with a full metal jacket training round. So what can the .30 Super Carry give us that we don't already have? Well, if you look at the raw ballistics, the .30 Super Carry is essentially a rimless version of the .32 Harrington & Richardson Magnum revolver cartridge. That's been around for a number of years. It launches a 100 grain projectile at about 1200 feet per second. The .30 case is shorter than the .32 H&R because the working pressure of the Super Carry is much higher. So less powder space can give us similar ballistics. But both the semi-auto version, the .30 Super Carry, and the revolver version, the .32 H&R Magnum, both use about a .312 diameter bullet. So that means they're really similar to the .32, like the .32 ACP is about the same diameter bullet. But of course their power level is way beyond that of the .32 Auto. Now, I have no experience with the .30 Super Carry. Never fired one. I've looked at a couple. One retired police officer did show up at my annual LEOSA retiree qualification shoot with one. Ran fine for him, so I guess it'll run for 30 rounds at least. He said he liked the light recoil, he liked the added magazine capacity. That particular officer has some physical limitations. He needs to walk with a cane to get up to the firing line, and he, for the most part, used the cane with one hand while shooting with the other hand during the qualification. And it's a pretty simple qualification, so he did just fine with it. But a lighter caliber is an advantage for him. And this brings into mind the first time the Illinois State Police had a retiree shoot, when the LEOSA, the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, when it went into effect. I was still down at the range, and some of our range officers from outer districts were in helping. And they helped with the first retiree shoot. There was one retired trooper with a walker and another guy in a wheelchair. And they did just fine. And one of the young buck firearms instructors made kind of a snide comment back in our workroom. He goes, "Oh, this guy in a wheelchair and guy in a walker, they got no business out there carrying guns. They can't make an arrest. They can't do." He went the whole gamut of what old guys couldn't do. And I said, "Excuse me, young trooper, but you're forgetting something. You're an active law enforcement officer. You need to be in good physical shape to make arrests, to chase people, to do all those kind of things. These guys are retired. Some of these guys have been retired for as long as you have been alive. They're not out there making arrests. And if they're carrying these pistols for a self-defense reason, a guy with a walker or a guy in a wheelchair is the easiest victim of all. They are entitled to carry those pistols for self-protection, maybe even more than you are." I kind of insulted him, but he reared back and he said, "Gee, I guess you got a point. I never thought of it. I thought about being active cops or not active cops." Okay, so concealed carry holders, cops who carry under that Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, They're out there to protect just themselves or maybe their family or people that are close to them should a bad situation develop. So it is legitimate for them to carry smaller pistols, maybe even smaller calibers, that they can handle effectively. May not hit as hard as a 45 or a 10 millimeter, but it might just get the job done. One of the other sidelights is one of the other range officers was there, and he's kind of an amateur cartoonist, fairly good at it. And by then, he'd been done sketching on his sheet of paper, and he had a cartoon of the guy in the walker pushing the guy in the wheelchair with his leg in a cast and an IV bag dripping and all this kind of stuff. And both of these guys had firearms shooting and brass spraying everywhere, and it was like first ISP retiree shoot. And it was great. I said, we need to make some copies of that for the bulletin board. And the old guy in the wheelchair got wind of it. He hadn't left yet, so we showed it to him. He thought it was hilarious, and he wanted a copy for himself. The point is, some people out there can't pack a 5-inch 1911, and they may not need one. But they are entitled to defend themselves with whatever it is that they can legitimately carry. So if you come at it from that point of view, then I think the 30 Super Carry probably makes some sense. And the equivalent revolvers, the small frame revolvers, and they're made by multiple companies in 32 H&R Magnum and the even more powerful 327 Federal Magnum, which is a slightly longer yet case, more velocity on that 32 caliber bullet. They might just be fairly effective as self-defense cartridges. Now, by way of research, I watched several YouTube videos where they tested the terminal performance of the 30s. And there's a lot of guys on YouTube doing that. I use water, which Dr. Marty Fackler helped me perfect the system of using 1-gallon milk jugs filled with water. And I can get about 95% correlation between pistol bullets that are fired in 10% gelatin and fired into the water jugs. Most of these guys use clear gelatin blocks. That's not a true ordnance gelatin. It simulates the 10% gelatin, probably fairly close. But the gelatin, it only simulates tissue, probably fairly close. So we're getting a few generations removed. But there are a couple of the guys that I think do it pretty consistently and pretty accurately. And now looking at those gelatin test results on YouTube, the 30 Super Carry jacketed hollow points that I saw generally gave expansion diameters that are a little bit less than a 9mm jacketed hollow point. Some were considerably less. Percentage of caliber expansion was probably pretty similar. And they gave similar to maybe a little bit greater penetration than the 9mm. And part of that is just the fact that the energy is pushing a smaller diameter projectile through the test medium, so it's likely to go a little bit deeper. The lightweight 30 caliber bullets are used. Most of the self-defense loads range from 100 to 115 grains. I would say they're going to be probably more sensitive to the impact velocity, in other words, the barrel length, than larger rounds. Their velocity falls off very much, and I would say the expansion is going to be reduced, penetration is going to be probably increased, but their effectiveness on target is probably not going to be the same. The designers figured that, now they're going to be carried in shorter barrel, subcompact kind of pistols, but if people build longer versions and increase the velocity, that's going to reduce the penetration. So they might have erred on the side of penetration when it was designed. And Federal is no slouch. They've been designing effective self-defense ammunition for handguns for a very long time. And all of that new technology that they have learned over the years was available to them in the design of the 30 Super Carry. It generates more kinetic energy than a 380 ACP, but I don't think kinetic energy is a valid predictor of terminal performance. But that does show that in terms of raw power, it equals or exceeds a 380. The diameter of the case, being 30 caliber as opposed to 36 caliber for a 9mm, means you can get more rounds in the magazine of either a 9 or a 380. So if you are in the more capacity is better camp, you should probably love the 30 Super Carry. It should be high on your list. In terms of terminal performance potential, I think it's going to fall between the marginal 380 and the adequate 9mm. I kind of veer off my norm of using one word to describe it, and I will give it a two-word description. I will call it marginally adequate. As long as the bullets perform in people the way they do in the test medium, in terms of expansion, wound cavity, penetration, it's probably not a bad round. It may be a little bit better than the .380, even though it is a smaller caliber. Now, the .32 H&R Magnum revolver is, but therefore, also a good self-defense round, because it should give performance as good or better than the .30 Super Carry. And the .327 Federal Magnum revolver load is going to up that velocity more, and as long as the bullets are designed properly to give good expansion, good penetration, the .327 Federal Magnum should be, I would say, adequate round as well. And that .327 Federal Magnum, I mean, it adds about another 200 feet per second of muzzle velocity advantage. So that's a pretty substantial step up in power. So in my opinion, having no first-hand experience with the .30 Super Carry, or for that matter, the .32 caliber Magnum revolvers, and I do not personally know of any shootings that we can judge their performance on people in the real world, I think just looking at the raw data, they should be decent rounds. They should give you a little bit less recoil than, certainly less than a .357 Magnum, maybe less than a .38 in a revolver. They should give you a little bit less recoil than a 9mm in a semi-auto, and still give pretty decent performance. They're definitely not mouse guns. And they're definitely not like the other similar caliber, the .32 ACP. So I think the .30 Super Carry, and I think the .32 H&R Magnum, and the .327 Federal Magnum should all be pretty decent performers as self-defense cartridges. That's my thoughts. Up next, cartridges that we almost never see used for self-defense nowadays in this country. These are what I call the 4 caliber revolver rounds. 44 Special, 44 Magnum, probably too much, 41 Magnum, probably too much, 45 ACP in a revolver. They have a lot of potential. If you're willing to pack a big revolver, you can have some pretty serious stopping power on your hands. So in the next episode, the 4 caliber revolvers. Folks, I hope you're enjoying these videos. I'm getting a lot of good feedback from them. The viewership numbers are up for me. So leave a comment if you can. Give me a like. Subscribe to the channel. Hopefully by the time you see this, I'll be over 10,000 subscribers and growing even further. So thanks for watching these videos. It's an honor when you do, when you pay attention to what I have to say. I hope you stay safe out there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.